Hi, I'm Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make this reversible jelly roll bag. So quick, so easy, you're not going to believe how fun it is and how fast it is to make this bag. I did this one in about 4 hours, and think about that, and that was my first time through. Every time I make something, a subsequent time, I usually trim off a little bit of time. So in no time at all, you're going to have a great gift for yourself and a gift to give. Now, we made that from Windermere by Brenda Riddle from Moda Fabrics out of a jelly roll, and we did a fabric for the lining. So it's very economical to make this bag as well. It only takes 8 jelly roll strips, and in a jelly roll, there's 42. So in one jelly roll from Moda, for example, that has 42, you can make 5 bags. Isn't that fantastic? So let me show you how to get started. Now you'll want to go to the home page of the Shabby Fabrics. At the very bottom there's a link that says free download. Click on that. You're looking for the pattern that says reversible jelly roll bag. Go ahead and print that out. It's in 2 pages. You'll just tape that together in the back so you've got your template. That's what we'll be using for the outside of the bag as well as the lining. So the first thing is just deciding what 8 strips you want. We just picked a nice shabby chic pinks and greens. I love that color combination. And you'll just sew those together all the way down the full width of the fabric. So, and we just press the seams open. You can see that here. And we like to press the seams open just because it helps the bag lay a little bit flatter. So once you choose your 8, sew together, press the seams open. We found that working with this big of a piece of fabric was a little bit awkward because most people's crafting or sewing tables aren't quite this big. So go ahead and cut that right down the middle because it's just easier to work with. So go ahead and cut that in the middle. And we also used fusible, it's kind of a fusible batting, fusible fleece. We chose the fusible just because then we're not having to pin or use basting spray. It's very readily available. So that's what I've got here. You'll want 2 pieces of that. The measurements will be on that download. So don't need to worry about what those exact measurements are. But basically you're going to have 2 pieces of the fusible fleece or fusible batting, whatever you choose to use, and just iron that to the back. Now I've done that ahead of time. And let me get that out for you. And this is what you'll have 2 pieces, right? This half and that half. Now, of course, when you start sewing a jelly roll together, you have all the different beginnings and the endings. If you want to go ahead, if that bothers you, you don't really need to trim that away because you're going to be cutting a template out of this. But if that bugs you, go ahead and trim it away. I know I often like things to be kind of really lined up, really squared up. So if that bugs you, just trim it and get rid of it. Now with your template, I want to point out something. See here where it says place on the fold. Now once you decide your 8 fabrics and you have everything ready to go, I wanted the pink at the top, so I'm going to make sure I turn this around. Wherever you place this on the fold of this half, because remember we got this half and that half, make sure you put it on the same place of the other half. So we're going to fold this in half, wrong sides together like this, and make sure those are lining up. You might even want to put a couple pins in there, but I didn't want my rows, my stripes, I guess I'd call them, to get kind of cattywampus. So I didn't just willy-nilly fold it in half. I tried to make sure that it was pretty much lined up with everything kind of stacked up on top of each other like that. And then you'll put your template. Now let's say you want to see more of the green, then shift this down wherever it lands on this one. When you cut the second piece out of the other half, make sure it's on the same place. Otherwise, where the bag comes together on the sides won't line up. They won't be the same fabric. So as you'd expect, you're just going to put that on there, pin it, and you'll go ahead and cut that out. And I've done that ahead of time to save us some time. And that's what that's going to look like, okay? And you would repeat that for the second half. So you'd have this one as well as the second one. All you'll do then is place both sides right sides together. I've done that ahead of time. So there was my one, there was my second one. We placed everything right sides together, and we just sewed along the sides and across the bottom 1/4 of an inch. Make sure you leave this completely open at the top, otherwise the bag won't be able to turn through. Now we're going to repeat those steps for the lining, but I want to show you something with that first. Something a little bit different, because it's not only the lining of the bag, but it's also the handles. So before you get too far ahead of me, let me show you something about the lining fabric that's important. You have a 1/2 yard of fabric. That's what you'll need for the lining and the handles. So you've got the fold toward you, and you've got your 2 raw edges. And actually, I want those toward me. So this is a half a yard, of course. Go ahead and open that up. I'm going to take this to the cutting mat, and we are going to cut this 10 inches. Let me just show you that. Let's cut the 10, and let's cut those handles together. So I already know I've got 18 inches going this way, and I'm going to cut my 4. You can either just cut the 4 strips to 2.5, or you could cut the 10-inch piece and cut that down. So I might as well just come across here, quickly cut those. Okay, 2, 3, and 4. We did that ahead of time because we want to protect that fabric for the handles, and then the rest of that fabric will be used for the button loop and the lining of the bag. So now watch how I fold the fabric. I've got the narrow part toward me and the long part along the side. I'm going to fold this in half. Okay. And I folded it this way. Now I've got a crease right here. This was me, I would totally press that out because I don't want to do it after the fact. So I just wanted to point that out. Go ahead and fold it in half this way. So now you've got 4 layers stacked. You're going to use the same template. You'll put that on the fold, pin, and cut out just like you did before with the outer part of the bag. So let's put that aside. You will then have, of course, the 2 halves that make up the lining. Just like you did before with the outer part of the bag, you'll go right sides together. I'd certainly recommend pinning. That's always a great idea. Again, you're going to sew along the sides, across the bottom, and up that side 1/4 of an inch. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we need to box the corners. So if you've never boxed a corner, let me show you how to do that. This is where I like to use a small 6.5-inch ruler. It's way more manageable than this big ruler that I use for cutting, big pieces of fabric. So if you don't have a little 6.5 Omni grip ruler, just get one. You're gonna be so glad that you have that in your sewing room. So to box the corner, we're going to use 3-inch boxed corners. So what does that mean? I want you to look inside the bag with me right now, and you'll see the bottom seam right here. Okay. Basically, it might be easier if I just show it to you this way. Basically, I'm going to try to lay this bag open back right over top of that seam. Okay, I'm going to get everything nice and pressed, nice and kind of laid flat. And I'm gonna just open it up with my fingers, okay? And when I peek inside the bag, I want to see if you can get an overhead shot of this. Do you see how this seam is laying right on top of the bottom seam? That's my goal whenever I box seams. If it's off slightly, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal, but you don't want it to be off significantly or your bag might be just a little askew. Now, what do I mean by 3-inch box corners? That means when I lay my ruler on here, and I have, if it's 3 inches, it's 1.5 to the left and 1.5 to the right. So I'm going to line this up with 1.5 going right down that seam, and I'm going to kind of just right there. See that spot right there? I have 1.5 here. I have the edge of my ruler here, and right at the 3 is when it fades off of the bag. I'm going to mark that. Okay. Now, I like to go ahead and put a pin there because I'm worried when I go to my sewing machine that that's going to shift on me. So go ahead and put a pin. I'll take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to run just a straight stitch right across there. When I come back, I'm going to show you how I like you to trim that off. And then we're going to go ahead and box the other corner exactly the same way. I went ahead on my box corner and I just sewed right along that line. Now, if that line bugs you, no problem. It's a friction pin. If you don't have a friction pin, just get one. You're going to thank me 1,000 times over because just like you saw me do, you can just iron it away. Just know if you ever do use a friction pin on a darker fabric, like a dark gray, when you iron it away, it can leave a little bit of almost a white haze. But on the lighter fabrics, I have never had any issues with any marks ever coming back. So, okay, I went ahead and boxed both corners, made sense to me. Now take that to your cutting mat and you're just gonna, you could use your ruler if you wanted to, and just put that mark right over where you just sewed, 1/4 inch, and trim that away. So let's do that real quick. All right, you do the exact same thing for the lining, and that's what I'm finally learning about bag construction, which I'm still fairly new to, is pretty much what you do to the outside of the bag, you gotta do to the inside of the bag, or the two aren't gonna line up. So it makes sense that you would follow the same exact steps of boxing the corners 3 inches for the lining fabric, which I've done already ahead of time. Now, I mentioned before, there's a loop here. So let's go ahead and do that. Super, super easy. The measurements, of course, are on the download. What is that? 1.5 inches by 4.5. But all you need to do, right sides together, press right down that middle. Let me move this over so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing here rather than being over in the corner. Now, when you open that up, you've got a center lane, so to speak. And now you'll just fold that up 1/4 inch right up until that fold, that crease. So you'll just press, do the same thing on the other side, press. There you go. And then just fold in half. Go ahead and take that to your sewing machine. Let me show you what we did with ours. And we just sewed a little, I don't even think it's 1/8 inch inside both edges. It flattens it, it holds it together, and it looks pretty. So that's a great reason to do that. What you'll do at this point, it doesn't matter whether you pin, you only need one of those. So let's just take that aside. It doesn't matter what side whether I pin that to here or pin that to here. Now, I'm gonna flatten it out like this. And I'll go ahead to my bag. Now I'm just going to visually find the center. I can see where this comes in, and that's about center for me. You could of course get very specific and measure that if you wanted to, but I don't think it's particularly necessary. Now I've pinned that. I'm just going to take that to the sewing machine. Let's base that in place. I don't want to be having to chase that thing around. I use typically 1/8 inch seam allowance for something like this. I'm just trying to get it to hold in place. There we go. And I like to go forward and back several times because think about it. That's where the stress on this bag will be, the handles and on the button closure, depending on how full you have the bag on a regular basis. So, and goodness knows, as women, we tend to have a lot of stuff in our bags. So, okay, now we have our bag, the outer bag turned wrong side out. What we'll do with the lining is let's turn that right side out. So this is something to keep in mind whenever you do bags. And again, I'm learning more of the commonalities from one bag to the next. Is typically when I try to okay, is this supposed to be outside, outside out or right side in? Or if you remember right sides together, you usually can't go wrong. So, and that's true of this case. let's put the right sides together. So I will, of course, insert this bag so those box corners meet up with these box corners. And that's logical. We want the lining to be mimicking the shape of the outer bag. So you're just going to insert that where that belongs. Now, you might want to go ahead and press these seams open. In fact, let's just do that. Let's give a quick press to that. It's going to make things a little bit easier when we're trying to line things up. Same with this lining real quick. Let me do that. I always think about some of these things after the fact, but hey, at least I thought of it ever, right? So you've got the side seam for the outer bag and the seam for the inner, the lining. See how they're lining up? Pin. Just pin all the way around. All right. Now, I'm not going to take all of your time. Leave these flaps open right now. I'm going to show you how we're going to mark those when I come back, but I want you to get most of the bag, like pin it to like the base of that, all the way around. When I come back, I'm going to show you how we're going to mark the bag because it actually turns through one of these handles. So get everything pinned till about here at the base of each one of these. And when we come back, let's go to the next step with you. Now that I pinned the bag, let me show you how we're going to mark it. 3 of the handle, this is where the handle will be inserted. 3 out of the 4 will be marked one way and the 4th will be marked differently because the bag turned through the 4th side. It doesn't matter which of those is you designate as that 4th side. Take your little Omni Grip ruler and let's mark down from the top. I want you to see that again, right there, 2 inches. And just a little mark off to either side so you can definitely see that. It's going to be important you see that. Same, flip the bag over, marking down 2 inches. We'll mark, and we'll do the same on the 3rd side. Then on the 4th side, because it's a pretty bulky bag when you consider there's lining and now there's fusible batting, you need a little more room than the 2 inches. So on the 4th side, let's measure down maybe 3.5 inches to give ourselves a little more breathing room. And you might even want to take some of the pins out depending on how far you pin. You can also mark it and then pin it. It doesn't matter. Certain things matter, the sequence in which they happen. This probably really doesn't if you mark it first and then pin it. Anyway, I'm going to mark it down about 3 inches down in here. This is going to give me a little bit more area in which to turn the bag through. So this is my 4th side. This is I can even put a little star there to remind myself, but obviously you can see the opening's bigger. Okay, now what are you going to do? If you need to put in any additional pins, do that now. You will sew between the black marks from here, 1/4 inch seam all the way to that black mark. Stop. Be sure to reinforce in the beginning and the end because the bag will be turning through. Same from this mark to this mark. If you want to go ahead and press the seams open, by all means do it now. Same from here to here. And lastly, from that mark to that mark. Now we also found just to ease it through and make the bag lay a little bit flatter in the very end, you may want to go in after you've done the 1/4 inch seam and go ahead and snip in. And that's common to do in curve areas because it just gives it a little bit of relief and it can stretch a little bit easier. So go ahead and snip in. Then the fun part that I always love is just turning it through. So once this is all sewn together, let's pretend it's sewn together, you're going to reach in through that 4th side and you're just going to pull the bag through. You'll just pull it through the opening as you would anything else that you're turning to the right side. We've done that ahead of time and that's what the bag will look like. And that's after I've turned that through. And you press out the corners as you typically would. Now we need to go ahead and make the straps. So let's do that together. We cut those ahead of time out of the lining. Remember that? Right away we did that. We cut those 2.5 by 18. You'll have fusible batting again. You'll want 2 pieces of that, and that'll be cut to 2 inches by 18. We didn't want the fusible batting to go all the way to the edge of the 2.5 because we found it to be really bulky when we turned it right side out. So that's why we trimmed it to be short of that measurement by 1/2 inch. That would give you 1/4 inch on either side. So when you get ready to take this to the pressing mat, you're just kind of shooting for the middle of that strip. I don't get too caught up in that type of thing. I'm just kind of visually shooting for the middle of that. And you know, you're just going to iron that down. Now I think we've done that ahead of time just to save us some time. Let's see here. We have done that. Get that out. We're so close to having your bag done. Oh, here we go. Here it is, all ironed down. Now what you'll need to do is you'll place that right side together with the other strip that does not have the fusible batting on it. Again, let's bring that ruler out. I mean, we're using that how many times today on this project? You're going to measure in from either end 4 inches. And let's mark 1/4 inch, or not 1/4 inch. I'm kind of just coming in 1/4 inch. So I can see my marks basically, and I'm going to do the same down here. Again, 4 inches. Now you're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we are going to sew between this mark and this mark, leaving this part open on both ends. Then you simply turn it through. I've done that ahead of time, and I have my 2 handles ready to go. So you see how they are open on the end. Give a good press as you would expect. Now don't be tempted to top stitch yet. We will do that at the very end. And if you don't know what I mean by top stitching, that's this stitching right along here. We'll do that all in the very end. It gives the bag such a finished look, and it's important to be able to close all those seams all at once. Next step is, watch this step closely. It's a little bit, when I first saw it done, I was like, I need to watch that a second time. So watch this closely. You'll want to grab some pins. Doesn't matter what side of the bag you start on. See how this has the fusible batting on it and this doesn't? This has the fusible batting on it and this doesn't. It would be possible for you to sew batting to batting and nothing to nothing. Don't do that. In order to balance the bag out, take one of the handles that doesn't have the batting with the, I don't even know what I call this section, I guess it's the intro to the bag handle, or kind of the beginning of it. Choose that with one that does have the batting, and that way everything's going to be balanced. Now give a good pin here, because you don't want that to shift. And you'll just take that to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch. Now it's the second thing that I want to show you. So let me get this done, and then I want to show you how to wrap that around to do that on the other side. So let's just sew this real quick together. This is going to happen quickly. Reinforce it really, really well. Because it's the bag handle. That's a lot of stress on the handles of any bag. Okay, that one was obvious, right? The next one wasn't as obvious to me. It probably might be obvious to you. Go ahead. So you've got to pivot this like this. Now watch me do this again. You saw this side go together. Now we're going to pivot this over the top. So those are right sides together, and I just pull it off to the side like that. Okay, and pin, and sew. Now, I nearly sewed this part of the bag to the other part of the bag, so when you do take it to the sewing machine, do make sure everything is out of the way. You're going to repeat those steps for all 4 sides of the bag. So there you go. I got that out of the way. I'm going to take that to the sewing machine, sew my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to repeat that for this. Oh, Let me sew that on and I'm going to show you. My temptation was to go across the bag with the other strap. No, it's to go on that side, right? You see what I'm talking about? That needs to go not across the bag this way. It needs to go this way. So I wanted to point that out to you because I just about sewed that together wrong as well. Anytime I do something wrong, or I'm tempted to do something that's not going to result in the right thing, I'm going to try to share that with you to hopefully you don't have that, you don't make that mistake. So when I come back, these are going to be sewn together and then I'll show you how to finish up your bag. Now that I've sewn the 4 handles on, I wanted to show you what this looks like. Okay, they're attached and of course there's that opening. As you would expect, you'll just press that under as best you can. It's bulky, 1/4 inch. I like to press and kind of pin as I go. So, you're just kind of making it work. We've talked about that in previous videos, especially when something's bulky. You might want to press your seams open, press things to the side, use your, a nice hot setting on your iron. Once you get that pressed under about 1/4, lots and lots of pins. I know we used lots of pins just to hold that together. And it just takes time. So just keep pinning, get those closed. Then you'll take, once that's all pinned, you'll take that to the sewing machine and you'll sew, oh gosh, I don't even know if it's a specific measurement, an 1/8 inch, a 1/16 inch. You will sew, of course, all the way around the handles, all the way down to the bag. This whole area here, this whole area up and through the handles is top stitched. And then at the very end, all you need to do, we used 1-inch buttons, maybe even a little bit bigger, about in there. We measured down about 3/4 inch. We hand secured a button to the front and a hand button to the back, which makes the bag then reversible. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this fun jelly roll bag.